Hi everyone, we hope you enjoyed the following podcast. Just a quick disclaimer that there will be topics covered such as eating disorders in this, so if you are sensitive, please click away now. Thank you so much, we hope you have a good time. Cheers.
Matthew, you've been a sick boy recently.
I've been a very sick boy. That's why I wanted to talk about it today, Max. So I've had a problem with the past week or so where it's just a never-ending stream of sickness that seems to come out of absolutely nowhere. Almost flu-like symptoms, although I don't want to admit that I would have my hygiene levels so low that I was somehow gotten the flu from someone or anything along those lines. Never could I ever be in the same room as someone physically. I do all my consultations, I meet everyone online. I physically shake hands through the internet at this point. But yeah, it was a period of meeting a lot of different people. Could not pinpoint where I got this kind of illness from. Kind of onset, I feel a little bit yuck, feel a little bit of a cold. Hey Steph, might have to cancel like our kind of daily adventures for a day, just kind of lay low. And then I was out for an entire week. Not like me at all. Usually when you generalize to, oh yeah, bloke's just got the man flu, he's just complaining a little bit. Normally I do complain a lot, but I'm able to do things. This time I'm complaining and not being able to do things. I was just completely destroyed. I completely lost my voice to the point where I had to cancel our conversations and our meetings, our podcasts. I'm like, Max, I can't even perform for you unless I learn sign language all of a sudden. There's not much I can continue on with that. So that got me thinking about how can we make a podcast that's interesting and can include some little tidbits of how I've increased my rate of recovery and really focused on primarily that, getting back into things rather than trying to kind of keep the lights on and then chip away at things over time. So I didn't want to back myself into a corner and then keep myself sick. Like I think I tried to see a couple of clients and then I put a stop to that. I'm like, I can't see any more clients. I literally can't even have the conversation, ask them about their day without completely losing my voice. And then my mouth would move, but nothing will come out. So it was very, one of those just really annoying situations.
Well, considering doing a AI generated voice for Matthew while his voice was gone.
So that was the problem. Majority of the podcasts are AI. We actually haven't filmed a single one, but for some reason it just cancelled. It just didn't work in the most recent one.
Yeah. And the other good thing was that literally immediately Matthew said, "Hey Max, sorry, I've lost my voice. Can't film today." My first reaction, I thought it was a good reaction. Straight to calling him. Straight to a voice call. He's like,
yeah, it wasn't the best. Well, I wasn't fibbing at least.
It's true. But yeah, no, it was good to have you back. Glad to actually speak to you again properly. Let's go through. So the first question I have for you is, what did you do to get better as quick as possible?
Yeah. It's every health practitioner you ask is going to have different tactics. I've known some people to chug bottles of wine, which we'll talk about later in the video. I've known people to just lie in bed, do absolutely nothing, not even get up for food. I've known people to decide to do marathons while they're sick because apparently it makes them heal better. I prefer more of a balanced approach where I'm incorporating various different aspects from different kind of evidence-based practices. For myself, I know when I'm that sick and I physically can't have the energy to move around to the point where it would be actively working against my recovery. So if I was to exercise or if I was to do any activity more than walking to the cupboard or walking to the fridge, my energy levels for the rest of the day and the next day would be significantly diminished. And that would mean that my energy has gone to recovering the potential damage that I've incurred from doing that activity versus healing. So I need to prioritize that healing process first. And there's not it's not like there's a specific rule book of, okay, you have some kind of immune reaction, be it viral or bacterial or whatever microbial substance. You need to ensure that your immune system's up to spec. So that's kind of priority number one. And to do that, there's a few different aspects that we're looking at. So we're looking at total energy, protein intake, healthy fats, carbohydrate distribution. Then of course, below that, then we're focusing on micronutrients, vitamin C, antioxidants, potentially iron, zinc, selenium. We're looking at potentially omega-3s for an anti-inflammatory properties. There's a few different areas, but I was focusing on my main priority, which is the only thing I could think about at the time, is, okay, what do I notice when everybody gets into hospitals? And it's one of the biggest problems in hospitals. 50 to 60% of them all have it. It's malnutrition. When they get in, they don't eat, they start to lose weight. I have a history of that in the past. I've lost 10 kilos around about in the span of a couple of weeks when I was ill like a few years ago. And that was quite alarming to me. And at the time I was maybe let's say 72 kilos, maybe 70 kilos. So I dropped a lot of weight, and it wasn't intentional. It wasn't very good for me. It was a majority of muscle mass as well. I would say like a good 70-80% of that was in tissue, because I was quite low in terms of body fat percentage at the time.
Right.
It was just because I didn't feel like eating, and I didn't acknowledge the importance of, this would have been like 7 years ago now, didn't acknowledge the importance of maintaining your energy intake to, number one, increase the rate of recovery. And then number two, it would be to maintain, of course, all the hard effort that you've done. Because as we know, growing muscle is a lot harder than losing it. So that's kind of the general thoughts that I was going through at the moment. And then we can talk about a few different topics of specific things that I've done to kind of support all those aspects. Do you have any thoughts on that one so far, Max?
Yeah, interesting. I really like where you went along with that one. What did you do in particular? So you're talking about protein. What role did you say protein had in that whole process?
Yeah. Generally, I would say that, and there's a little bit of debate on if protein actually has an impact to your, let's say, your total energy expenditure and your total muscle mass maintenance when you're ill and inactive. So no matter if you have someone who's at complete bed rest, can't move, if you feed them 4 grams of protein per kilogram, which just for reference, the Australian government recommendations is about 0.8 grams per kilogram, so like over 4 times their recommendations, they still lose pretty much all the same rate of muscle mass, regardless of how much protein you feed them. You can avoid a little bit, but it's still dramatic to the point where unless they're doing some kind of activity.
Yeah, stimulus, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. With the lack of stimulus, there just isn't the response to maintain that muscle and maintain that tissue. So my main priority was to ensure that I was meeting I was aiming for about 1 gram per kilogram. Usually I aimed for about 1 to 2, but at the point in time, my focus was shifted a little bit more to energy to ensure that my total energy was not in a deficit and I wasn't losing weight total. Because I think that was probably where my priorities were at that point in time. I wasn't trying to gain weight during that period of time because I thought it was realistically, I wasn't going to gain weight. And gaining too much weight during your sickness period can also impede your ability to recover. We've seen that through the evidence as well. So I was kind of just trying to float at a maintenance and ensure that my energy and my protein were not limiting factors in my ability to recover. It was my immune system doing the main job, and it wasn't me kind of kicking my immune system while it's down to like, oh, come on, like you can do better. I've had this with clients in the past. Oh, I'm feeling really sick. I've got some nausea. It's like, it's not going well in terms of my energy intake and my micronutrient intake, but I'm losing weight. And that's what we want in the first place. And I'm like, no, that's not what we wanted at all. We wanted to lose weight because we wanted to be healthier. We're completely missing the mark here. We wanted to be healthier. We set this up as a goal of health on a pedestal. How do we track that? Well, one of the metrics that we can track is body weight. And that can be useful in some different areas. In your specific case, reducing your weight while you're sick is impeding your ability to be healthy. This is the opposite of what we've set out to do. Potentially that there might be a little bit of a benefit later on if we haven't lost too much weight during that period of sickness. But if we've lost too much weight, I can almost guarantee that a large percentage of that weight loss will be in muscle mass. And that's a massive problem because, as we know, muscle mass is one of the best indicators for our health span, our longevity, how well we do. If you walk up into the hospital, you get admitted to the hospital, and let's say you have a twin, but it has lower levels of muscle mass, you will get out sooner and you'll have less problems and symptoms from the actual hospital experience compared to the twin with exactly the same experience. And it's one of those things where you really have to express that and convey that information of why that muscle mass, why that tissue is so important. And I'd love to get your opinion on this one, Max. Is it the muscle mass that's important, or is it the ratio between muscle and adipose tissue?
Guys, quick ad break. We are currently taking on clients. Click the first link in the description to explore more. Back to it. I think it's the muscle mass that's important. I think ratio definitely does play a big factor. But genuinely, as a rule of thumb, losing muscle mass is a bad thing, full stop. It's not productive in any way. And if you're someone who's, I'm a bodybuilder and I lost 5 kilos of muscle, and I'm actually healthy now. It's like, yeah, amazing work, man. Like, you really just proved me wrong there. It's like, well, obviously there's always going to be outliers, but as a rule of thumb, for pretty much 99.9% of people, anytime you're losing muscle mass, that's a bad thing. And it's not even a bad thing for, like, sure, health, whatever, great. It's a bad thing for if you want to lose weight to look good. You don't want to lose weight. You want to lose fat. And you're not losing fat when you are losing fat, but you're not, the proportion of fat to muscle is not where you want it to be when you're sick. So same goes for, that doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you're on or whatever you care about. Losing muscle mass is not a good thing and not something that should be aimed for. To answer your question about the ratio thing, I think the ratios definitely do matter a lot, but I would say, yeah, total muscle mass is going to be slightly above to a certain extent as well. I think you've got people that are extremely obese, would it be class 1 or class 2? I'm not sure exactly how the BMI scale works for classes, but once you do get to a point where you're very, very obese, in maybe like the high 30s or so, would high 30s be class 2?
You're really testing my knowledge here. I really don't focus too much on that BMI scale, but I generally say class 1, class 2 and above. I'd be like kind of waving red flags in terms of what are we actually doing in situations.
Once you do get that heavy, because you're so heavy, your body actually does have a good amount of muscle mass. Your hips, your legs, everything does have actually quite a decent amount of muscle mass on it, purely because imagine if I strapped a lot of weight onto Matthew's entire body, he would start to grow muscle.
If I'm wearing a backpack that weighs an extra 40 kilos, you generate some pretty good legs. But that's under the assumption that you can undergo daily tasks and you can actively work throughout your daily tasks of living. If you're sedentary and you're unable to move around, you need a scooter to do things, then we've kind of coined the term sarcobesity. We have sarcopenia and obesity at the same time. Sarcopenia being the reduction in total lean mass, and whole range of problems. But please go on, Max.
I guess my point is that in these particular people, and I think there's a decent percentage of them that do exist, very high BMIs, still being relatively active, resulting in decently higher, probably higher than average levels of muscle mass. Just, if you were to take away all their muscle tissue versus an average person's muscle tissue, probably the person with the very high BMI is going to have more. So it's not a raw thing of like the more muscle mass you have, the better in terms of ratios, but probably most of the time it is.
Yeah. I think it's the ratio matters a lot more when you're of a lower total body weight. So if you were, let's say, if we were to generalize, you're old, frail, imagine like a very stereotypical 90-year-old where kind of skin on bones kind of situation, very low muscle mass, relatively low total fat mass, but there seems to be a higher fat mass to muscle mass ratio, and there seems to be almost a fatty mass infiltration in terms of the muscles. That it's quite interesting if you look at an ultrasound of, it went around recently on social media. You look at an ultrasound of a 70-year-old triathlon athlete versus a 70-year-old adipose oriented sedentary individual, relatively similar total body fat percentage, but the density of the muscle fibers and the fatty mass infiltration of the sedentary individual is alarming. It's almost like completely different persons, and you would almost be like, oh, it's a completely different species if you looked at it, but it's just kind of the influence of doing activity, exercising, putting that positive stimulus and a healthy amount of stress on those muscles and the skeletal system.
Yeah. And I think also on that, Matt, is that's what's to be said for, because nutrition really hasn't played a part in that. I would say if those people ate the same diet, there would still be the same outcomes. I think the only real main driver of what's going on here is exercise and maybe other factors, sleep, stress. As
much as I would like to think nutrition solves all the problems, I would tend to agree with you. I would say that diet has a very minor role in that situation. Because, of course, if we're not providing the stimulus, it's like if we have everyone lining up to get on a bus, but the bus never comes. The bus is the stimulus to get you to that place. We're not providing the stimulus for the protein to be used in the muscle generation or the muscle maintenance. We're not providing the stimulus for the blood glucose to be shuttled into the cells. Instead, it's floating around the bloodstream, and now we have type 2 diabetes. Isn't that fun? Yeah. Stimulus is extremely important, and I feel that exercise is one of those things where we don't have an adequate solution for that through pharmaceuticals as of yet, and I don't think we will in the next 10, 15, 30 years.
I think what is one of the silver linings of being in a bad situation, I think there are dozens of silver linings if I'm being brutally honest, but one of them, if being in these bad situations, is that you actually get to see what your true food and eating habits actually are. I think that's good because it can give you some analysis on what to do moving forward as well. For example, Matthew, you said you always have the proclivity to undereat, don't eat enough. And so then when you get into these situations where you're not your usual self, you're not your usual disciplined self, doing the things that make yourself tick, and you're stepping outside of that, you're in an environment you're not familiar with anymore, you're sick, or you've had something awful happen to you, like a death in the family or something that's out of your control almost, that's put you in a really bad mental state, physical state, etc. I think your body, because it's focusing on, or your mind even, it's focusing on so many other things, it kind of reverts back to your original, well, like not your original, your current true eating habits. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I don't know. I would say that my ability to use motivation and my will to do something good for my future self is significantly reduced. But
that's exactly what I'm saying.
I would also say that I'm biased in terms of that I am a dietitian and I am very food oriented. But in the past, like that 7 years ago, where it's like, yeah, okay, I go to gym, I work out every now and then, I'm gaining weight over time, but like, oh man, I'm feeling sick, so I'm just lay in bed and watch YouTube, or I'll kind of just vibe to a podcast or something like that. That's my kind of default. I'm sick, I don't want to do anything state, and it provides a very good insight into what people in those clinical hospital settings are. It's like, oh, I'm not active, I'm not really hungry, I don't want to eat. It's like, I get where you're coming from. I understand that. Some of the other dietitians may not, but I can exactly experience what you're going through at the moment, not to maybe the extent that you are in your specific clinical condition, but I can kind of get your vibe. And it's important to acknowledge that our current feelings of how we're going don't necessarily lead to better outcomes. So yes, we're sick, we're not feeling amazing, we're potentially not going to have good outcomes in the next 1, 2, 3 weeks. But if we focus on the things we can do now, we can significantly improve the outcomes post those 3 weeks. And if we improve those outcomes, there's a potential that we can reduce the chance of falling ill, falling sick, having another major adverse cardiac event, things along those lines.
Yeah, interesting. And I think you brought up something really interesting there. I feel like not necessarily for me, a little bit for me, but definitely for you, you almost have a superpower as a dietitian that separates you a lot from other dietitians, which is that you are a rare breed in that you typically undereat. And I think it'd be fair to say, I'm not sure where I'd classify most other dietitians. Obviously, I'm putting them into a very, very broad category here, but I think it's very much fair to say, I think if you don't admit this, you're just either ignorant to the truth or you're bad faith, whatever it is. But dietitians have an unbelievably high percentage of eating disorders in general, like either past before they were dietitians or current or whatever it is. And I think you in particular, Matt, you have a very privileged position to speak to clients and discuss with them and really empathize with them. You've dealt with it yourself in real world. So you've got a really good history and understanding of, for people that are struggling to eat enough, which is a lot, which is most people really, especially in a clinical setting, you can really delve into that. Whereas if you've had, if you're a dietitian who's struggled with losing weight or you're always overeating or something like that, it's hard to sort of empathize with someone on that level. Do you agree?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I think, there we go. My voice has gone lost again. I think if we are in the position of having lived experience, that's why I think these eating disorder dietitians working in an eating disorder practice, amazing. I think it provides a perspective where I may not be able to come in and be like, I get where you're coming from. I can understand the stress. I can empathize. I can imagine what it might be like, and I can understand what clinical outcomes are coming in, what are the symptoms, how do we manage the situation, but I'm not going to be able to empathize in the same situation where I've lived through an experience like that. I think I've had certain aspects of disorder eating patterns in the past, nowhere near the amount as some of my peers in the dietetics field, but I can come from the under-eating, let's say, history, and it's very unintentional, not conscious of it at all, not influenced by people around me, that kind of thing, as far as I'm aware. And it's more so a kind of a default setting in my brain, I guess, if that makes sense. So I have to actively work against those default, hey, you don't need to eat kind of situations, and remind myself that after my 72-hour gaming binge of just sitting on the computer doing absolutely nothing, and then I stand up and I have a blood clot that travels to my brain, ensuring that once I get up that I need to have some food and I need to break that up throughout the day. So that's been a good insight in providing a really good support for especially those elderly individuals who potentially aren't looking to increase their intake, or if we're having some neurodivergent individuals who can't seem to have a consistent schedule and reach our calorie intake. It's a little bit of a balance, but I find that it does provide a good insight. But we can also learn from each other. Yeah. We can learn from each other's experiences. I can learn from someone who struggles to overeat. I can learn from someone who has disordered eating patterns. I can very much learn from someone who does not have disordered eating at all and very much just sees food as a source of numbers that we need to fit a certain target per day. I think having a one-size-fits-all situation doesn't always work, and we need to tailor our response, tailor our individual care to those individuals.
Yeah, man. I love what you said there. So look, basically we're on the same page, is that you kind of do go back to your default. And I don't think it'd be fair to say your default is set from birth or from your teenage years. I think you can change your default. But I do think when you get into those high stress situations, you do naturally go back to that default situation. So if you're someone who's struggled with weight gain their entire life and you just always feel like you're, struggling to keep the weight off, or, at any point you could go up in weight. As soon as you get into that really stressful situation, that's when you're going to gain the weight, because all those guards, they're gone down now. You're thinking about something else. You're preoccupied, and it's all too much, right? Like, because the mental stimulus is so high when you're going through a high stress event, it's all too much to be on your A game with your food as well, kind of thing. But I think it's good. I think that element is good, because then you know yourself and you know truly where you sit. Oh, okay, I'm not as far along as what I thought I was, right? Let's say you're in eating disorder recovery. You've been smashing it for 8 years. You go, nah, I'm healed. I'm good. Yeah, like I don't have any issues. Big event. Oh, hello. Big event happens, and almost overnight you slip back into it. You go, oh, I was not where I thought I was. I was cocky as to thought I was in such a better position than what I actually am. I think that's good. It's good silver lining of those negative things happening in your life.
I find that as long as we're aware of our situations, aware of our past, our proclivities, our inclinations, we're able to plan ahead. So, for example, when I'm sick,
oh, I like that.
I specifically plan my day. I need to tick off mental boxes. If it helps me, I even have a whiteboard. I'm like, okay, have I had something for breakfast? Tick. Have I had something for lunch? Tick. Did I have a snack in between breakfast and lunch? Potentially not. Okay, is that important? Am I noticing loss in strength, loss in weight, reduction in total adipose tissue, reduction in total lean muscle mass? Am I noticing clinical symptoms? And do I need to adjust my mental ticking of boxes? I find this is really helpful for a lot of individuals, especially in these kind of situations. And planning ahead can be really useful, especially exactly like you mentioned, if you have disordered eating patterns in your history. Can we plan ahead for those potentially life bumpy events, those waves throughout life where we can work around these situations? Do we have potentially a family event that can cause some additional stress? Can we avoid some of those cues? Do we maybe go for a walk when everyone else is eating, or do we sit down and have that kind of environment? What works for us in that situation? I think I'd love to have an eating disorder oriented practitioner on the podcast. I think that would be extremely interesting. For context, in terms of my clientele, I'm happy to see people with prior history of eating disorders, but any active eating disorders, I usually refer on to a more experienced clinician just from a scope of practice perspective. So, and of course, making sure that myself and the client are very much aware of that situation. Happy to have conversations about relationship with food. Happy to have conversations about how we can incorporate food to reach our nutrient goals and work towards plans. But if we're having active issues which require additional psychological insight or potential psychotherapy, I very much refer on or potentially work alongside the psychologist in a very in-depth manner.
Yep. Yeah. Well said. Well said. Matt, how are we going to... Okay, we're feeling sick. What are we going to do with vitamin C to make ourselves better?
What a great question, man. What a great question. I think that's the first thing we all jump to is when we're sick, vitamin C. I gotta have a vitamin C supplement or have a multivitamin or a Barocca or whatever it is, and that'll make me feel better. I find that potentially there's a little bit of placebo there. But again, if placebo is working, it doesn't really matter. Placebo can be a very good thing in certain aspects. As far as I'm aware, vitamin C is one of many different nutrients which has an impact on our ability to recover quickly. And I think potentially just as equal in terms of its impact is vitamin D. So we know that a large portion of Australians are vitamin D deficient. If we're not aware, for audience listening, vitamin D is typically synthesized from UVB sun radiation from our skin into our bloodstream. So we have like an element of vitamin D that can get converted into the active form through sunlight exposure. I personally supplement with vitamin D because I am a recluse who never comes out of his cave and just works 24/7. And ensuring that I'm getting those vitamin D as well as my multivitamin kind of intake, not through the multivitamin itself, but through whole food sources predominantly, I find that I'm ticking multiple boxes. So if I'm focusing just on vitamin C, I can eat literally nothing but pasta for the entire day, and I will reduce my total vitamin C stores because you need vitamin C to process carbohydrates. And if I tick off all my vitamin C, I'm like, yeah, cool, I'm getting it through supplemental form. Am I actually producing any good outcomes for my total long-term health? Potentially, but I may be also missing a whole range of micronutrients. And we really like vitamin C because it's a really potent antioxidant. It's very important for the immune system function overall, but so is zinc, so is selenium, so is magnesium, so is vitamin D, so is omega-3s, so is total polyphenol intake and fiber and all these amazing things we get from food. Now, when I'm sick, high volume foods with low energy, such as, let's say, high fiber items, if I'm looking leafy greens, broccoli, potentially some cauliflower, things like that, they're not really ticking the box from the energy perspective. So I may lean a little bit more towards cheeses and root vegetables like potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, carrots, things along those lines, which may provide me a little bit more bang for buck, a little bit more energy per gram of total volume. And that can kind of tick two boxes at once versus me kind of just working my way through my standard diet, which is kind of just for a maintenance, very slow kind of, if I was to put in quotations, main gaining kind of situation. And I find that ensuring that we can work towards things and incorporate the best of all aspects can be really useful. So vitamin C is very important, absolutely. But I actually prefer to get my vitamin C from sources of food. So I'll have capsicum, or I'll have some berries, or I'll have particular strawberries, a great source as well. I'll have some citrus fruits. Generally, I find those make me feel better overall. And it's probably a placebo aspect as well. But I find that if I'm getting food in, then I think that's ticking off another box where I don't necessarily have to concentrate on two separate items. So like, okay, food and vitamin C supplement. It's like, okay, cool. I'm doing really well with the vitamin C supplement. I can kind of slack off a little bit on the food. I'm not going to focus as much on that. I find that that's what I tend to do. And I'd love to get your experience, Max. Do you think that I'm being a little bit silly? Do you think that I should focus just on the supplement and the food as separate entities, or I should use the whole food situation? Remember to check the link in the description or our website for our consultations. Back to it.
I think vitamin C is a pretty unique one. Reason being is I think I've mentioned this briefly in the podcast, and I'm not going to die on this hill. I very well could be wrong, but I do remember reading back in 2020 that vitamin C in the supplement form lacked this natural protective outer layer on it in comparison to when it's found in whole foods. That actually gets destroyed by the hydro. Wait, the fuck? Did I just fucked it up?
Hydrochloric?
Yeah, hydrochloric acid. Yeah. Because I knew it was HCl. I didn't know. The hydrochloric acid in your stomach, which is what your stomach uses to break down the food, and that protective layer in the whole foods ensures that the vitamin C still is able to be available to your body and is absorbed by your body. But in the supplemental form, that isn't present for whatever reason. And maybe 4 years later, it's a completely different story, and it is in the supplemental form now. But reading it back then, essentially it was pretty clear to me that what would need to happen is that you would need to either have a ton of the supplement for vitamin C to actually absorb much at all. Or you can just have a regular amount of veggies and fruit, and you get plenty of vitamin C that way. So I think it is a more unique one in the sense that it really is genuinely just have it with food. And I think the good thing about it as well, again, the unique thing about it as well for me, you might disagree, but what I would usually recommend to people is that vitamin C isn't one of those things you need to focus on necessarily, because it's in such a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. As long as you're having enough fruits and vegetables per day, you're by proxy going to almost certainly have enough vitamin C per day. So I think you don't even need to focus on it at all. Like, unlike, for example, something like maybe a selenium might be something you actually need to focus on in particular to get enough selenium every day. You might need to focus on, okay, I'm going to have a certain amount of Brazil nuts every day, or whatever other fruits have selenium in them. I'm pretty sure chicken has a little bit in it, to get enough selenium in it in every day. But something like a vitamin C, it's in such a wide variety of foods, you don't need to really worry about it too much. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. So if we have a baseline of vitamin C intake, a relatively wide and varied diet, I wouldn't really stress too much about vitamin C while you're sick, unless that sickness is going on for more than 3, 4, 5 days. Then I'm like, okay, maybe we can optimize things a little bit better, because a 10% reduction in total sick time tends to be a lot of hours total. So then I would kind of lean towards potentially a vitamin C supplement would be beneficial during that sickness. And I think we had a conversation recently, Max. Would you like to take me through what you found from vitamin C supplementation when you are sick?
Yeah, again, I read this a long time ago, so I don't know how smart I was when I read it. I guess that's the problem when you read things a long time ago, is that you read it and you go, like, it seemed great at the time, but then I don't know, I could have been really dumb when I was reading it. So I'm probably still really dumb now. But point being is that I think the study actually said on average it reduced the amount of time being sick by half a day. I'm pretty sure. And what that essentially means to me is that I guess it does work. I don't even know whether it was statistically significant or anything like that or not, but I guess it does work a little bit. But half a day, man, like really, that's really clutching at straws there.
Yeah, it's quite tricky because I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to go back and read the study. So if I was to establish the importance of vitamin C, if you ate literally no vegetables, not a single one, like it was just like grains, and there was no intake of any vitamin C sources, then supplementing with a vitamin C source when you're sick absolutely is going to make a lot of a difference, without a doubt. Absolutely. But if you're you just go through your daily life, you have a bit of a cold, I wouldn't even think it makes much of a difference statistically. I don't think it's even clinically significant, to be honest, if you're adding a vitamin C supplement when you're have a wide and varied diet, generally adhering to AGHE, Australian Guide to Healthy Eating Guidelines, 4 serves of fruit, 4 serves of veg, 2 serves of fruit per day kind of thing. Yeah, it's one of those things where it absolutely makes a difference if we're deficient, but everything makes a difference when we're deficient. I think it's important to note, if we're deficient in something, we need to get to that adequacy, even potentially like a quote unquote optimal range. Buffer. And then everything kind of gets ticked off. It's like we don't need to focus on it if we're having an adequate level of intake in the first place.
100%. Speaking about health, Matt, I love my favorite pastime is people lecturing me about what's healthy and what's not. That's my favorite thing. People always tell me, red wine, man, so healthy for you, bro, so healthy. It's such an amazing liquid. And I was just nodding my head. Yeah, that's cool. Talk to me about red wine. Why do people love saying it's so healthy?
Having a history of my familial history is predominantly Italian. I kind of identify myself as an Australian because I don't speak a word of Italian, and that's just generally how Australians are, pretty multicultural people. But majority of the family tends to align with the Italian Orient. It's very much red wine at majority of kind of dinners. It can be healthy, incorporated. It's good for the heart. You know. Yeah. I've always thought, okay, well, we've already established that alcohol is has a causal relationship with bowel cancer and stomach cancer and things like that. I'm like, okay, it's not amazing. Already off to a not amazing start. And then, okay, well, what's the potential beneficial properties of red wine? If we're looking at it, and Dr. GPT says general antioxidants, don't disagree, resveratrol, flavonoids, polyphenols, all kind of buzzwords, which I don't necessarily disagree with. Those are very important and very beneficial let's say, food chemical substances. They do have a benefit, absolutely, but I'm not entirely sure if it provides the context that I'm really looking for. We see that with moderate being like a 15 to 30 gram alcohol intake, which is the equivalent of, let's say, a shot or so of alcohol, and then maybe
I think it's 3. I think
three shots of
one shot
alcohol.
has 10 grams in it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That shows how much alcohol I consume. If we're looking at that kind of intake, and then it's about 1 to 2 glasses of red wine per night, we do see a little bit of a benefit in terms of total cardiovascular outcomes, predominantly just in women. And I'm not entirely sure if the literature has changed. I think it's middle-aged women provide a little bit of a benefit. It's pretty neutral for majority of everyone else. So kind of nor here nor there. I'm curious, and we had this conversation earlier, is it that people who drink red wine literally don't get enough antioxidants total from the rest of their diet, and that's why we're seeing a positive benefit, and we're just observing that in kind of the literature? So you go through your day, man, had a super stressful day, had like my Nutrigrain for breakfast, had a pie for lunch.
Nutrigrain's probably not even a good example because it has all the fortification shit in it.
Oh, a complete opposite. I guess had some white bread for breakfast with
Had a
jam.
hash brown.
No, jam would have some antioxidants.
Had a hash brown.
Yeah, there we go. Had a hash brown. Stopped by Macca's, had a burger or something for lunch, and then man, stressful day. Have a couple of glasses of wine. Your total antioxidant intake is pretty much just from the wine. Which, okay, cool. Net positive. Having some antioxidants, amazing, really good. But we haven't had it hit our fruit, which we know that a vast majority of Australians, I think it's over 70%, don't hit our fruit targets per day, which is 2 serves. Just for context, 1 mandarin is half a serve. So you have to have 2 mandarins or 2 kiwis to hit 1 serve. Love kiwis, by the way. They're absolutely amazing.
That's me.
Up
I'm in the majority, baby.
Brilliant. So yeah, is it that we're just not like intaking enough antioxidants? But then there's also the other kind of area of, does a little bit of alcohol provide a hormetic response? And for those unaware, a hormetic response is kind of a low level damage that our body can adapt to. In the same sense of, I guess, having a cold every now and then is a hormetic response to build up an immune tolerance for having colds all the time and potentially worse later down the line. So we saw when the British invaded pretty much every part of the world, they brought a shit ton of diseases because they're filthy animals. If you're not aware, Australia is very much a British kind of colony, so kind of shooting myself in the foot there. When they went over to these different parts of the world, they brought a ton of diseases. The previous inhabitants of those areas did not have the same level of immune build-up, immune response. They haven't received the same level of hormetic response to those immune dysfunctions, kind of wiped out the population. Smallpox was rampant. Don't really have smallpox too much anymore. Is the hormetic response from the alcohol leading to the beneficial cardiovascular outcomes? Not entirely sure. I think it's a little bit more leaning towards the antioxidants, potentially the polyphenols, the resveratrol in particular can have that benefit. But in the same sense, I'm pretty sure I read a couple of years ago that having a cup of tea, like a cup of black tea, has 3 times the amount of antioxidants that a glass of red wine does. Or if you're really concerned, you really, really want, like, oh no, I specifically want the resveratrol because it comes from grapes and it's blah, 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 and this and that. Have some cranberry juice, like literally a shot of cranberry juice. You're set for days. Like it's that much concentrate. I think it's like 3 to 4 times the amount of concentration per volume, and it doesn't have the alcohol in it. But of course, we need to acknowledge: is the alcohol leading to an excess adiposity? Are we standardizing for calorie intake? Because I think if you compare someone, I'm Jimbo, and then I don't drink any alcohol at all, and I'm Jimba, and then Jimba drinks some alcohol, it's probably going to be not too much of a difference. But if Jimba has the alcohol and is of a high adiposity, we know very much through the literature that the high adiposity individual will be more likely to experience major adverse cardiac events, type 2 diabetes, chronic health dysfunctions. It's kind of the list goes on in terms of total cancer risk and all these different areas. Ensuring that calories are equated and then we're not gaining weight from this alcohol, because alcohol is what, 27 kilojoules per gram or something like that, Max? It tends to be quite high in terms of the total energy that we absorb from alcohol total. I think it's 27, 26, maybe.
It's 29.
29, thank you. Thank you very much. Shows how much I focus on alcohol.
I think. I don't know. Wait, did you search it up?
No, I haven't searched it up just yet.
No.
Yeah. So it's in one of those tricky scenarios. I'm like, okay, yeah, absolutely. Having a glass or two here and there, not a problem. But if we're having multiple glasses a night and we're having that every night, and it's like, oh man, I just can't lose weight. I don't understand what's going on. It's like, and my blood glucose is terrible. Like it's like my doctor tells me I'm pre-diabetic and I have all these problems now, and I can't actually. It's 29. Awesome work, Max. Very nice. Good memory. And I'm having all these problems, and he's telling me that like my diet's really good. I'm like, okay, let's explore that. Let's see what's going on. Is the alcohol a problem? Potentially. But is it potentially helping? We need to weigh up the pros and cons. Just like alcohol and wine, there's pros and cons to every food. I often hear the argument of legumes and phytates. Phytates are an anti-nutrient. They reduce the absorption of other nutrients. But as for total pros versus total cons, legumes are hands down amazing, like 5 out of 5 stars. If I was to say total pros and cons of wine, look, I'm leaning towards more cons than pros.
Absolutely.
Just that kind of the thinking of. And then not one food means it's healthy or not healthy. Can we include that in a balanced diet? Perfectly fine to have wine every now and then. Just because it may not be optimal doesn't mean that it's not healthy in a balanced diet.
Most definitely. Yeah. I think we see this best in the few studies that show carnivore is superior to a Western diet or whatever other diet. We see this highlighted at the highest extremes, and then we see it trickle down into other facets of studies as well. Red wine potentially being one of them. Just in the whole element that if you start out having a really, really poor diet and you change that person or that group of people and improve it in any way, shape, or form, even if the improvement is still really, I don't know how to say it without swearing, really bad. So if you start off like rock bottom and then you go up a couple steps, you're going to see improved health markers, all these elements that are looking positive. It's just, you can't extrapolate much from that really, because you could see that with anything. And that's what we see with that my gut feeling, what we see with the red wine stuff is that if you got a whole bunch of people that are, as you said, not really consuming any antioxidants or anything that's actually going to be productive to their health in any way, and they do start consuming that via red wine, man, like, well, of course you're going to see benefits there, right?
Something I don't really hear very often is that why don't we just eat the grapes?
Yeah. Why don't we just eat an apple?
Yeah.
So, yeah, without a doubt, I think, again, same with the carnivore stuff. There's lots of similarities here, and it would be good. It's really good to see how people that, you know, the carnivore people aren't as crazy as what we think they are, because there's a lot of people that believe the red wine stuff who we would deem as like being sane. Whereas like most Matthew and I would probably put people who are on carnivore as being pretty insane without throwing too much shade. But yeah, it does show how easy it is to justify, you know, because once you have an addiction, once you have a thing that's set on your body, your brain wants to believe one thing, you're going to believe it no matter what, really. And you're not going to question it too vigorously.
You get into that confirmation bias trap.
Yeah. And these people want to drink. They love red wine. Oh, I love having my red wine every night. They want to drink red wine. So you're going to look for anything, right? You're going to look for whenever, what's his name? Pete. What's that guy's name? That sells the weird shit, Pete.
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of people who sell the weird shit. It's rampant, absolutely rampant.
Pete Evans?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
When he says have your red wine, even though you think is an idiot, you know, yeah, it's insightful. He's wrong about most things, but that is bang on.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of copium. It's like, okay, I really like my red wine. Can I look for reasons why it's good?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, are you being objective? Are you ensuring that you're reaching your health outcomes? And then is it like, oh, okay, is it a dose-dependent correlation? Does more red wine equal more health? Where with more fiber definitely equals more health in majority of cases, up until a certain point. I think the point where it tips over, where more red wine doesn't equal more health, is past the kind of 1.5 to 2 glasses range. Then it's like, okay, hold up, you need to pull back a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, actually. Yeah, I think for me, yeah, like it is like, yeah, like obviously it's a lot of cope. It really is. I think the thing I've just got going around in my head at the moment is that maybe because we know how potent placebo is, if you convince yourself it is healthier, that's actually maybe better. As long as you're not justifying it to consume more. So as long as you stay, like, let's say if you're fully realistic about it, right? And you were going, nah, I know red wine, like, sure, it's not horrible, but I'm not going to get caught up in the hype. It's really isn't the best at all. I could just have, an apple or grapes or cranberry juice or whatever, and it would get the exact same effect, if not better. Be like, look, I'm going to acknowledge that, but I'll still have it a few nights a week because I really enjoy it, right? That's probably the most practical, most pragmatic way of going about it. But that person who has a couple nights a week versus another person who has a couple of nights a week who truly believes it's like Jesus's blood. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's a time to analyze objectively if it's fitting within your goals and if it's potentially impeding you. But of course, then red wine also has the aspect of it can be relaxing, and if it is the only stress relief in your life, it's quite tricky. I think we need to try to find a different stress relief and incorporate some additional ones. But I think it's one of those things where if I say, hey, you need to stop the red wine because it's the thing that's limiting you from reaching your goals, but it's also the other thing that's keeping you from falling off of a cliff. I think it's very much a situation of, okay, we need to evaluate, can we incorporate some additional things that might be beneficial for you and a stress relief at the same time? One of my favorites tend to be exercise. But of course, gradually and incorporating exercise slowly, I think is very important. Not going 0 to 100 real quick and then having that yo-yo effect of, in the same sense of, you don't go on a strict keto carnivore diet immediately if you want to lose like 0.5 of a gram per week. You don't jump straight to doing marathons from not doing exercise for the past 15 years. Slowly incorporating it over time, working within your means, not pushing yourself too hard, and really enjoying it. And I think that's a huge importance.
Yeah, and then you'll be able to get up to 1 bottle a day eventually.
A bottle a day?
Then 2, then 3.
A bottle a day
wine. Just work your way up, slow steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Slow steps. I'm actually at 7 bottles a day of wine at the moment, Max. I'm quite enjoying it. One of the parallels I like with what you just said there was, because I've been thinking about this recently, is I love what you said because it's exactly what I think as well. Is you have to deal with things that happen in your life, and you can't just avoid them forever, right? So if you have like an issue, you must deal with it. But you can only deal with it when you actually have the mental or physical capacity to deal with it. So just like you said, if you're at a point where you're at rock bottom and the only thing that's keeping you going is having some wine, obviously go for the wine, right? But I think when you're at a point where you're not like that anymore, then you've actually got to deal with the issues and don't rely on these external things that are keeping you happy and sort of like putting off dealing with it kind of thing. Are we working productively towards our issues? Are we actively tackling them, or are we kind of just putting our head under our pillow and kind of head in the sand kind of situation?
Yeah,
I would actively not recommend to use wine as a coping mechanism. I think it's fine to have occasionally and indulge with friends, families, a social setting. Potentially, if you wanted to have like a chill night, whatever it is. But if we're using it as like, stressful day, have to have a glass of wine, I think we need to reevaluate what our priorities are and if that's actually beneficial for our long-term health.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. Are there animals that actually do put their head in the sand? I feel like I've seen videos of animals that actually do.
I've heard it was ostriches, but I don't actually know if it's a thing.
Yeah, I think I've actually seen a video of an ostrich doing it.
That's hilarious.
That is so funny.
I've tried to do that before. It's much harder than you would expect.
It's impressive. That is true. Imagine
Guinness World Book of Records kind of thing. I think we can achieve it, Max. We'll put our heads to it and we'll really give it a crack. On the topic of wine and kind of general healing, during while you're sick, I've heard that, just have a glass of wine before you go to bed and you'll sleep better. Sleep is extremely important when you're sick. it's one of probably the most important aspects of getting better quicker, ensuring that you have adequate sleep. We do majority of our healing from our daily functions during sleep. We do our majority of our let's say, drainage of our brain fluid when we're asleep, recovery of a whole different variety of metabolic and health functions. Alcohol does not improve your sleep quality. It's full stop. That's it.
No.
It can improve the rate of falling asleep, but I know personally that from anecdotal experience, alcohol can improve the rate of falling asleep, but the quality of sleep is dramatically impeded. It's just
and even the sensation as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that's for me. That's one of the biggest things. Is that the sensation is the deepest, best sleep after a couple of drinks, but the quality of sleep is just not there.
Yeah, interesting.
So the way you feel, you can't trust the way you feel, which is the one of the really deceiving things. Same as caffeine. Like my parents will tell me all the time. I don't bother to correct them because I'll get into that another day. Why correcting people probably isn't the best. But they'll say, "Oh yeah, no, I have my caffeine. I'll have a cup of coffee before bed, and then I sleep like a baby." It's like, that's great. I'm so glad you feel like that. That's amazing. But the quality of sleep just isn't there. Yeah.
I think it's more of a sleep hygiene routine rather than the actual substance providing a beneficial outcome to our sleep. So we know objectively that, and we'll jump into caffeine another day, but we know objectively that alcohol impedes sleep quality, which doesn't produce any good sleep outcomes. If we're using it to potentially, while we're sick, to get to sleep, look, if you can't sleep at all, I'd be kind of a bit worried. But if you need, like, let's say, quarter of a glass, I don't think it's going to cause huge issues of wine. But if you're having like a glass or two to get to sleep and it's like, I'm kind of waking up a couple times, or just objectively looking in the data, your ability to recover is going to be impeded. Plus you're already under metabolic stress. There's already an inflammatory response going on. You're adding onto that because of course alcohol is an inflammatory chemical. Our liver needs to process it. It's just extra steps our body needs to do when it's already fighting to keep the microbial substance away. Just an extra thing where I don't think it necessarily fits in terms of making you feel better. Although I have heard that my nono likes to have a little bit of honey and a little bit of wine, boil that down. It's like a cough syrup medication, which is amazing because that brings us onto the topic of honey. Now, I did a recent Instagram post on honey and why it's so beneficial. It is hands down just one of those amazing things where you can intervene really early on, very, very low risk, pretty much zero as far as I'm concerned, unless you're diabetic or something along those lines. It has pretty similar outcomes to standard cough medicine. It's 100% better than not using a cough medicine, and it potentially has the impact of reducing the antimicrobial resistant spread of diseases and bacteria throughout society from the use of cough medicines and antibacterials overall, which has an additional benefit. So for me, while I was sick over the past week or so, I was predominantly using honey if I had a cough or something like that, and it provided a fair bit of a benefit. It's only a little bit that you really need, just enough to coat the throat kind of situation. It's antimicrobial, it has antioxidant properties, it reduces symptoms of coughing and itching and scratchy throat, and overall it provided a pretty good benefit for me. Plus I have the placebo behind it where it's additionally benefit in that area. If I was more sick, would I have had more of the honey? Kind of a situation where I think the honey was at its end in terms of the effectiveness that it could produce. I probably would have included an additional cough syrup, so it's kind of a double whammy from different aspects. It's two different pathways of attacking the same situation, and potentially progressing on from that, I may have included some paracetamol, some ibuprofen, something along those lines to additionally build on top of that treatment method. But starting off, I think honey is one of those slept on kind of items, and I think some people kind of push it under the rug. It's natural, so I can't actually produce any good health outcomes. It's like, no, we can have a lot of beneficial aspects from it, but I think we need to acknowledge where its limitations are and where its benefits are. And the benefits are a great first response. But if look, man, if I come in and I'm in the emergency room and I've been shot through the stomach, I'm not going to pour honey over it. I'm going to go get myself stitched up and the bullet taken out. It's kind of acknowledging where it's applicable and where it's not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's amazing not to sit in either camp, not to sit in the natural side of things and you're only going to do everything naturally, or the opposite camp being you're only going to do hard medicine, drugs and shit. Just do what is best, not be dogmatic about things.
That's a whole nother podcast worth of things. I think that probably might be the next one in terms of natural versus non-natural, pros and cons of both.
Before I give my take, because we'll talk about it in a following podcast, what are your thoughts around not correcting people in general when they say things that are dumb?
I wanted to do a full podcast on that one because I think that's such an interesting topic and a complete rabbit hole. So keep your eye out for that podcast. I think it's going to be in a couple podcast time. It's such an interesting area, and I think I especially see it on the internet, on social media. I do it myself in terms of on Instagram, correcting random strangers online in an attempt to get views. But I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation, more of a moral kind of area, and potentially
it is
looking into if it's applicable in our daily life, and especially during client consultations, which I think people won't really realize. It's like you go there to expect to be corrected. A lot of the time I don't. So stay tuned for that one. We'll have an exploration of that area. So
yeah, 100%. Client consults are massive. I think it's a different sphere, and this is what we'll get into. It's a different sphere once you're on a public platform, but we'll go through that in due time.
So last topic I wanted to touch on, Max, before we finish up, is activity during your sickness. I try my best to be active to the point where I can walk around the house, potentially walk around the block if I'm able to. But if I'm sick to the point where I'm like just completely dead, I generally don't. What is your perspective on activity during sickness?
I think, yeah, you got to get out. You got to do something. And even if it's the tiniest thing, I don't even know why I say that. I've got nothing to back up what I'm... Oh, maybe there is evidence. I don't know. None that I've seen, at least. Getting out of the house gets you out of that little rut. And it really is a massive mental change of atmosphere and everything goes on. I think it might do nothing to you physically to improve your physical abilities. But when you're sick, because you've got so much time and time drags on for so long and you're thinking about your situation for so long, you're feeling sorry for yourself. There's just so many things going on, which are negative thoughts and negative emotions. To get out, remove yourself from that environment and almost re-click mentally, I always feel so much better coming back after a tiny, could be a 2-minute walk around the block or just literally going outside and staring at the grass for a little bit. I don't touch the grass. That is disgusting. I never touch grass, but I do look at it on occasion when I get really desperate. So for me, that's a must, but it's not a must for everyone. You know, like I'm not saying everyone has to do it. Not everyone has to be like me, but for me, when I'm sick, it's a really, really important thing and the other thing is, I never feel like at all. I'm like, oh, just let me stay on the couch. But then once you actually do it, you feel so much better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think activity is one of those underrated things with illness overall. My voice seems to have kicked the bucket again. Maybe I'm getting more sick.
Whilst Matthew's...
Please go on, Max.
Yeah, well, one of the probably very hot take, I haven't heard anyone talk about this for a long, long time of what to do from a bodybuilding perspective when you're sick. The rule of thumb before COVID was if it's above the neck, if the sickness is above the neck, you don't be a pussy and you train. Because essentially you don't want to be missing out on days training. And if the sickness is below the neck, you can probably be a pussy and probably just skip training. Because like if you're got gastro, you're feeling really ill, like you're not really going to be able to train in general. That's just pretty impossible. Or if you've got like an infection, like a chest infection or something like that, it's probably too full on to train. But I'm not sure what the recommendations are. I would personally, it sounds bad saying it's on a public platform, but I'd personally probably still continue doing that. Just try not to get other people sick as best you can. But that probably is the recommendation for me for training in general as a bodybuilder.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. I think there's an element to that. I know personally from experience that if you have gastro, you probably shouldn't squat. You will end up dropping your guts on the floor.
You'll die, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely, without a doubt. In terms of overall activity when you're sick, I think there's an aspect of an increase in total blood flow around the body, an increase of the movement of nutrients and potentially the not so favorable micro kind of thingies flowing around, ensuring we're getting those to those lymph nodes and getting the actual item out of our system can provide a really great benefit. As far as I'm aware, activity when you are sick can provide a really strong and improvement in total reduction of sickness time. But doing a hard exercise, going for a marathon when you're sick, you're shooting yourself in the foot. There's a lot of damage that gets incurred from additional exercise. I would even say that doing a proper, like a bodybuilding oriented hypertrophy workout or a powerlifting workout would be, again, shooting yourself in the foot. Because like, it's only a couple of muscles where I'm really just really targeting. It's like, yeah, but you're increasing your total level of protein allocation to those resources versus the kind of systemic thing that we need to be allocating our energy and resources to. But then again, if you have the energy to do a full bodybuilding workout, I wonder how sick you actually are. But I think we can often trick ourselves in those really sporting oriented individuals. We can often trick ourselves, I can't be sick. I need to keep training, and then I need to get to that result, because if I fall behind, everyone else is going to be ahead. It's like, yeah, but if you also do more damage to yourself now and you don't give yourself your time to heal, you're going to be way behind. You're going to be perpetually sick for the next little bit, potentially more, and kind of taking a pause, even if you're on a deficit and you're cutting for whatever reason, even taking a pause and sitting at maintenance for a little bit can provide a really great benefit to reducing the total time sick, and then you can smash back into things and continue on your pathway. But if you prolong that sickness, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. The outcomes are not going to be beneficial for you on a net perspective.
Completely agree. Yeah, 100% agree.
Cool. I think that wraps up the majority of the topics I wanted to talk about today, Max.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Absolute legends. Cheers.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to the R.E.A.L Health and Nutrition podcast. The sponsor of today's show is you. You support the show by listening and using our services of dietitian consultations and performance coaching. We offer in-depth one-on-one consultations to help you achieve your health and performance goals. Any random bloke online can give you a generic meal plan, where we here at R.E.A.L work collaboratively with you to reach your goals, making you feel heard and including you in your journey's planning. Our service offers tailored advice and can accompany meal plans and or realistic nutrition strategies, which can be booked via our website, www.recoveryexerciseandlifestyle.com. That's www.recoveryexerciseandlifestyle.com. Just a quick disclaimer, this podcast is for education, information, and general entertainment purposes only, and does not constitute the practice of medical nutrition therapy or healthcare of any discipline. The content discussed in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute of professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please review our terms of use via our website. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.